the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression. JFD's there for 30th week. First, a group of circus freaks are betrayed by the trapeze artist in Freaks. Next, a gangster based on Al Capone takes over Chicago, Scarface. Finally, a giant ape wreaks havoc on Manhattan in King Kong.
It's money and adventure and fame. It's the thrill of a lifetime.
Welcome back to the Junk Fa Diner. The first movie is Freaks. This is a movie from the 1930s. 31 or 2 or something like that. It concerns a group of freaks. We're doing this movie, like we said earlier, because our man Robert in Podcast Town would be like furiously angry every single week that we announced what movies we were doing, that none of them were freaks. And he hated every single movie we've ever reviewed on the show because it was not Freaks. And he especially hated Richard Linklater, who he feels is the complete opposite of Freaks, despite the fact that the entire first half of this movie is just people like plotlessly talking to each other. So I feel like maybe a little
just
of
the
that.
First half only?
Most of this movie is people plotlessly just talking about like the minutia of living in a circus together. So I read a few reviews of this movie after watching it, and it seems like people tend to compare Richard Linklater to this movie. So I really kind of am more confused than ever by Robert's anger, but we'll get to that. It's a movie directed by Tod Browning. This isn't a Universal movie though, is it? Or is it?
MGM.
MGM. Okay.
I think it's their first horror film.
Yeah.
Okay. Tod Browning, I ask because most famously he's known for directing that English Dracula for Universal, that original. The one that Sean's Spanish grandpa does not enjoy as much.
The inferior version.
The inferior Dracula. So that's what he's most famous for. He also did this, which, from what I understand, did not do well upon first release and kind of became like a lost movie until the Midnight Movies in like the late 60s, 70s, and 80s kind of revived it. And, people kind of began realizing that it was sort of a masterpiece kind of a thing at that point. I first heard of this movie in high school because my favorite band at the time, the Ramones, have a song called Pinhead about this movie, and I was like, shit, like I gotta find this movie. If the Ramones like it, they also got a movie about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that's a good movie, so these guys know what they're talking about. So I found it. I found a crummy VHS copy, because that's all we had at the time, at Blockbuster, and it was like really worn, and obviously they didn't have 4K transfers at the time, so between the audio quality on tape and it being a tape and the fact that everybody has like really, really thick accents in this movie, it was basically unwatchable. Like it was really hard to tell what was going on. You couldn't really hear what people were saying. So, I left that feeling very neutral about the movie.
Should have rented the Spanish version instead. Dialogue's real clear.
It's true. The Spanish version is great. So, that's the last time I watched it. First and last time I watched it. And so here we are watching it again. Like I said, the movie concerns circus folk. We've got, I should have written their names down. We got Hans. He's a little person who looks very cute. He's dapper. He wears a tuxedo. He is in a relationship with another little person who's also very cute, who is a lady.
Franz.
Franz? Are they Hans and Franz?
No.
Is that it?
Would be great, though.
Well, she is German, so yeah, you had me there with that one. I was like, well, who knows?
It's Frida.
Frida, there you go. All right.
Played by his real life sister.
Ugh. Nasty. All right. We've also got other freaks, like we got a little caterpillar guy. He's got no arms and legs. He just kind of stumbles around. At one point, he does like roll and light a cigarette with just his mouth, which is like pretty intense. we've got a few pinheads. We got a little guy who looks like a chicken who was, kind of paid homage to on that American Horror Story show. Most importantly, we have Schlitzie, who is a pinhead, the Ramones' titular pinhead, although there are a few other pinheads in the mix. Schlitzie, although being played by a guy, is apparently a girl in the movie, or at least just really enjoys pretty dresses. It's like never really stated. And Schlitzie is just the cutest goddamn thing on earth. The way that she's proud of her little dress and the way that like everybody else tells her dress is pretty and that she gets all bashful about it is number one. I think that scene is like, just so cute, insanely cute. And I love Schlitzie. There's also a scene where a lot of the pinheads are like kind of outside playing, like they just play like children and it's like very cute. And yeah, so a lot of this is just like kind of the minutia of like their relationships, who they're dating, like how they live, what they're doing, them talking to each other about, you know, oh, in the next town, blah, 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 and oh, this and this. And kind of, you know, just like the mundanity of, circus life. At one point though, little Hans falls in love with a trapeze girl who is a quote unquote normal lady. He falls in love with her. He leaves Frida, wants to marry this lady. Unbeknownst to Hans, though, she only wants to marry him for his money, because he's got like a lot of that circus money, I guess. That's kind of unclear. He's rich.
No, he's got an inheritance.
Oh, okay. All right. He's got that inheritance. They got all their bases covered here. I think this movie is really great. I love the natural sort of acting in this. We'll talk about two movies later where it's like kind of unnatural acting, maybe still like a little bit big from being like, you know, because that thing we talked about this last week where like, film was mostly, I think, in a lot of ways influenced by stage acting, especially in these parts and like vaudeville and stuff like that. So a lot of the tendency in some of these movies is like for actors to play it big, like they're playing to the back of an audience that no longer exists because they're being filmed and not on stage. And I think this movie doesn't have that. I think that there are a lot of like kind of really subtle performance things in this. And, you know, also that they're just, you know, it's slice of life stuff for a lot of it. Like, you know, for instance, at one point, Frida, you know, she's talking to Hans about their relationship and whether or not they're going to keep seeing each other or not. And they're breaking up. And like, she just kind of plays with her scarf, like a real nervous person would. And, you know, I think a lot of other movies, like maybe somebody in Scarface that we'll talk about would, you know, put the back of their wrist to their forehead and say, oh, woe is me that we're breaking up. But they go a different way in this. And I think that's really cool. I love that these freaks, like, love each other and all their eccentricities. Like, nobody ever really rags on anybody else for the most part. Like, they're a group. They're one for all for one kind of a thing. You know, all the way till the end. They get revenge, as only freaks can at the end, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I like all that stuff. I like that you know, I think a lot of the Universal monsters sort of play with that a little bit, like who's the real monster kind of a thing. But like, I feel like they kind of pull back. Like, I think in Frankenstein, it's like, who is the real monster? Is it the doctor or is it the creature? Well, it's the creature. Let's kill him. Like they kind of toy with it and then pull back. I think that this movie very much says that the freaks are in the right for getting revenge and for doing violent things to the quote unquote normal people who are the real monsters in this. So I think that the movie is with them. The audience is with them, hopefully. And, when they get their violent, horrifying revenge. But yeah, I think this movie's completely great and wonderful. And what do you guys think about it?
Yeah, this is one that I hadn't seen similar to you in a very long time. You know, I had rented this as a kid. I think I had heard about this through a copy of Tod Browning's Dracula on VHS that had like a little documentary about the guy and what he did outside of Dracula. And, you know, so as a little kid, I'm like, hey, you know, I like weird movies. I like weird things. I like this Dracula, all right. I mean, I don't really like the language that this version is filmed in, but, you know, a pretty decent movie. So let me check out this Freaks. And I had the same experience as you did, which was I didn't get it. I watched it initially, thought it was pretty slow, had a hard time understanding most of the dialogue. I feel like it wasn't just the VHS. I feel like even in this cleaned up version, the dialogue can be a little bit poorly mic'd or difficult to hear. And so I didn't enjoy it very much as a kid. Although I was, excited that we're finally going to talk about this. And by the way, Robert, don't feel too bad because I'm still waiting for us to get around to things that I recommended for the show back when Fredo was on. So it can take a while around here. But yeah, I was glad that we got a chance to watch this because it is such a legendary exploitation movie. I think a lot of people credit this for like killing Tod Browning's career. And a lot of people have fond memories of seeing this as a kid, and being freaked out by it. So yeah, definitely cool to go back for this. And I love the fact that there are guys like Tod Browning or Crispin Glover who can, offset 90% of the movies that are made with the same pool of like 35 attractive young looking people. And these guys will cast legitimate weirdos, not just like character actors, but like, real freaks, people who might have a hard time getting work at a grocery store, let alone, in a film. So that's really cool that people can, who might otherwise be excluded from society can actually get meaningful work in a film like this. And, this movie obviously goes way beyond that, beyond just casting these people. It really does kind of humanize them. And we talked about this a little bit, last week in regards to Haxan and how films get marketed. But I think this is another interesting example of, the dichotomy of having a moral message, because this movie does have a moral message. Like the little guy that's getting exploited throughout, one of his early lines is like, "Are you laughing at me? Most big people do laugh at me. They don't realize that I'm a man with the same feelings as them." And it's like, that's, a pretty profound line for a 1932 film where I feel like maybe it wasn't the most progressive time. But at the same time, they're still exploiting these people to sell tickets. Like they're front and center in the marketing. The movie's about them. I don't think you could sell this movie at all without the real freak actors. Like if you tried to cast this with just regular people and use special effects to remove their limbs or transform them into freaks of nature or what have you, like that'd be a fucking disaster. So, it's an interesting blend there where it's like, that Tod Browning sides with these people, but is it appropriate? Is it exploitation? And I think a lot of people at the time felt that this was exploitation, which is interesting. Like it's interesting that people would be so dead set against this film and find it to be such an exploitation angle when it's clear that the two regular people are the real monsters throughout. So it's cool from that historical perspective. It's also cool just in terms of settings. It's set at the circus. And I love a movie set at the circus, man. Whether it's Disney's Dumbo or Ghoulies 2. I mean, there's a lot of cool movies set at circuses. Jacques Tati, Terry Gilliam, and Joe Dorowski have all set some of my favorite movies at circus environments.
I love Jacques Tati's Big Top Pee-wee. That's my favorite.
Yeah, it's a classic one. Yeah. And, Tod Browning does a good job here to utilize a lot of the cool elements of the circus life. Like they have those really old school, big wheeled carriages that they ride around in. And you get like cool shots of like people hanging up laundry between the carriages and just this real slice of life thing where you feel kind of their daily routine, that this is normal for them, even if it's so weird for the outside observer. And it's, that's fun. It's also kind of interesting to see that even in the 1930s, it appears that the American culture sensed that the circus was kind of a seedy place. Like, these days we look at it like, oh, it's a bunch of winos working at the circus and drifters and et cetera. But even in the 30s, like it had this seedy reputation. So that's pretty cool to see. I'd like to go to the circus sometime. I've never actually been. Have you guys been to the circus?
Yeah, the circus always comes to Cincinnati on my birthday. So for a lot of my, and then it's been that way even up until now, but from when I was a kid, it's always in town on my birthday. So I had a young birthday that ended up at the circus.
Do they do anything special for you if it's your birthday at the circus? Do you get to ride the elephant or anything? Cram out of a clown car?
Not that I recall.
Oh. Well, maybe next year. There's still time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there's no elephants at the circus anymore. They got rid of them this year.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is sad.
No, it's not. It's a good thing.
Ultimately, yeah, it's probably a good thing. But the circus is fascinating. I think it's such an interesting little slice of American culture, such a weird little subculture that seems uniquely American, even if like America, I think, doesn't really these days have too much affection for it. The performances in this, I think, are goodish. I mean, you can't really expect great line readings from a group of untrained actors in the 1930s. I mean, even like trained actors in the 30s can seem kind of stilted. And in this movie, some of the dialogue does feel either very stilted or just difficult to hear. And that can be a problem. I mean, it does slow down. And this is only a movie that's 64 minutes or something after it's been recut. And for it to feel slow is kind of a problem. But there are a lot of fun parts with these freaks. I like the fact that they're always getting smashed, which is, I think this was filmed during Prohibition. So it's pretty crazy that they're like drinking beer and wine, like in pretty much every scene. Everybody's getting smashed. They're all smoking cigars. Like, turns out that like the sideshow is like a real party atmosphere. And they're charming. And I mean, this is going to sound horrible. This is going to make me sound like the worst person in the world, but I think I legitimately do have like a soft spot for retarded dudes. Like I agree. I like weirdos in a way that I think is genuine. Like I don't want to laugh at these people, but I do kind of want to stare at them. Like, I like to look at these unusual characters, and it's nice to have a way to stare at them where it's not impolite, like you can't exactly stare at unusual people in real life because that's pretty inconsiderate. But Tod Browning's done me the favor if I can see these pinheads and just like kind of marvel at their oddities from the comfort of my own living room. So I do like that about this, and that it celebrates them, and it's you can kind of gawk at them in a way that's, I don't know, it's not as judgmental as I think people thought it was at the time. So yeah, I mean, overall, I like this movie, but chiefly because I like the freaks in it. I mean, I kind of wish that their talents had been put to a better use. The story here is pretty muddled. Like it's a very basic plot. It's not even a double twist. It's a single twist. And it takes a long time to get going. I mean, it's a great ending. I love the fact that they get their comeuppance, and the visual of the way that they get their comeuppance, and the shot of the woman, looking down. Great shot. I mean, that's awesome, but you're right. It does feel like a lot of Linklater style hanging around, and at least in a Linklater movie, Impossible to Plow exempted, you can hear the dialogue, and that wasn't really the case here. So maybe this is kind of like a man with a movie camera type of argument that like Parker was trying to lobby last week, and maybe my expectations are unrealistic for this period, but I wanted this to be better. Like I wanted this to be a lot better. I think it deserves a place in cult movie history for doing something that nobody did at the time, employing these unusual people and doing so in a way that's humanizing. But as a watchable movie, I think it's by far the least watchable of the 6 movies we've watched in the past 2 weeks. I mean, it's if you took out the freaks, there's nothing here. Like he doesn't exhibit very much creativity outside of like, let's get some weird freaks in this. So, I mean, compared to something like Jodorowsky's Santa Sangre, which is set in a similar place, again, unrealistic to expect that, a movie 50 years later is going to hold up to this, or vice versa. But I don't know. Did you guys feel like this is kind of, you can feel that this was taken away from him and cut up? Like, it doesn't feel like a complete movie.
It was. It was cut. But I couldn't disagree more about the fact that it's doesn't feel like cohesive, or doesn't. I love this movie.
The one part that I don't think that, like, that where it's obvious that someone fucked with this movie is that tacked on ending. Like, we get the ending where it's like they get their revenge and here's what it is. Like, there's like a whole wraparound story. And then we get another scene after that of Frida and Hans like reconciling. And I think that feels very tacked on to give it like a happy, non-monstrous ending. But other than that, I think that it feels very organic.
Yeah, and that tacked on part feels like it was filmed on like completely different film stock in like a different decade. Like it looks different. So Yeah, that part is weak, but I don't know. It felt to me like a little directionless. Like, does it build a sense of momentum? Like, do you feel like these freaks are really at risk for a long period of this movie? And does their comeuppance really register with you? I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe just knowing that it was coming kind of neutered the impact for me.
Yeah,
I think it's very impactful. Like, I like that these guys aren't Frankensteins or something who we're like immediately repelled by. Like, they're characters who we like. It's like the opposite of most like horror movies in general, and especially horror movies at this time. Like, we love these guys. Like, we're seeing them. We're seeing cute little Schlitzy. We're seeing them play. We're seeing their daily life. We get to know them. We see them as more than just freaks. We see them as people, and then we see them as monsters. And I think that that's what makes it really great. And we're still on their side. We think that they're doing the right thing by becoming monsters.
Yeah, and maybe that's the leap that I didn't make in my mind is I didn't. I mean, the two regular people, and I hate to use the term regular because it feels like it kind of demonizes these quote unquote freaks, which is also a horrible thing to call these people. But the regular people are such douchebags from the outset that like I didn't feel these freaks becoming monsters. I actually would have liked something that would have more moral complexity, where like maybe the freaks were struggling with their decision to get comeuppance. Like, but you don't have any of that. It's just like, and it all happens like off screen basically, or it's just like, oh yeah, and then they got the revenge. And for me as a viewer, I'm just like, oh cool, they got the revenge. They should get the revenge because the villains in this are so cartoonishly evil, and the protagonists or the freaks in this are so cartoonishly likable and sympathizable that it's like, what else could happen? And I don't know, like I could have used some more complexity where it's like, I want to see them struggling with these decisions. And I feel like not only the decision making, but all of the actual actions involved in the revenge. I don't know. It feels like it's all off screen to me.
Yeah. I think you're expecting too much. I mean, this is like an EC comic or like, a Tales from the Crypt story. Sure, it's simple, but it's a lot of fun too. Like, and you got to, like I said, take into consideration early 30s. I don't know. Nothing like this, I think, really had ever been done before. And as far as movies from this time, I don't know. I have a lot of fun watching this. I've seen this movie a lot. I actually came to this movie kind of by accident. A buddy of mine, he had asked for the movie Freaked for Christmas one year, and his parents, not knowing what the hell he was talking about, bought him Freaks on VHS. But we were still cool with it because I had heard about this movie. I'm like Sean, I've always been kind of fascinated with the freak show element of the circus. Especially, I remember I had a set of trading cards. It was like all freak show trading cards that I ordered out of the back of a magazine. Loved it. I always take that to school. Got it taken away from me a couple times. But it was just a trading card set of all like old photos from like the 30s of actual sideshow freaks and like little stats on the back, like baseball cards. It was pretty cool.
Did they have any of these guys? Because these are all like legitimate traveling carny acts. Yeah,
I think the Pinheads were in here, and maybe that half man, half lady was in here for sure. The human torso guy probably was in that card series. But yeah, I mean, so Tod Browning also had an affinity for the circus. In fact, he ran away as a kid, ran away with the circus, and performed in the circus for many years before becoming a director. So he has a real life insight into that world, and you can definitely feel that in this movie. It feels very real and authentic. And that's one of the reasons he was able to basically have his pick of various sideshow performers throughout the circus world at the time, because he did have connections into the circus from his circus days, and because of his clout of recently directing, Dracula, he was able to kind of utilize his resources and kind of pull the best freaks from various traveling shows and other circus performers, which I thought was really cool. And it's just an interesting story about how this got made as well. I mean, obviously MGM came to Tod Browning looking to break into the horror world, like he had done at Universal with Dracula, and MGM was seeing the huge success that Universal was having with their monster movies, and they're like, we want in on this monster thing. Let's have a horror movie. And Tod Browning pitched them this crazy freak movie, and they were uneasy at it about it from the get-go, and it proved to be pretty disastrous for MGM. It was not a hit that they had hoped. And they got a lot of shit for it. There's a great story, I think they talk about it on the Wikipedia, but in various other places too, where they had a test screening in early 1932, and a woman threatened to sue MGM, claiming she had a miscarriage caused by the viewing of this film, which I think is pretty cool. They should have put that on the poster. That could have been some real advertising there.
Yeah, I'd see a movie if that was on the poster. That's a great selling point.
It's a cheap abortion.
But yeah, they, like Sean mentioned, they did edit this movie after some of the test screenings, and people complained. I guess the ending, there was a lot more sequences and scenes of the freaks actually attacking Cleopatra. There was a scene where the freaks castrate the Hercules guy, which would be pretty gnarly.
Well, and the scene leading up to that is pretty cool. I will say that's one of my favorite sequences, is that part where they're under the trucks or whatever and they're crawling through the mud.
Yeah.
That's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, and I think Tod Browning achieved his goal. Like, I think he delivered one of the scariest and craziest and most interesting horror movies that had been made to this date to MGM. I just don't think audiences were ready for it. And I think, audiences have come to it over the years. Like Parker mentioned, it became a favorite amongst the midnight movie circuit. And like I said, even people our age discovering it on VHS. I remember, back in the day, your friend only has a handful of VHS tapes. You have to watch, only certain things. So I remember us watching Freaks a lot. I mean, even if we didn't watch the whole movie, just fast forwarding to various parts and watching the freak sequences. We watched this a lot, but I think now, seeing it in, like a good digital version, I don't know. I think it holds up as a really good, well-made, just tight story. Like you said, it's just over an hour. To me, it feels like if you like things like, The Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt, it has kind of that sort of story arc to it where it's, maybe a little predictable, but someone's going to get some revenge. There's going to be kind of some moral, who are the real monsters kind of shit at the end. But nevertheless, I think the journey there is great. I think all the actors in this are really good. Like you said, some of the performances can be a little hammy on the part of some of the lead actors, and the two little people, Hans and Frida, they were performers. Like I said, they were brother and sisters. They were part of a whole family of midgets that were called like the Doll family. But yeah, I mean, they're not Hollywood actors, and that kind of shows at times. But despite that, I feel like this movie works. It's never boring. I don't think. I love the inner workings and day-to-day life of the circus people, and kind of, some of the character actors in this are great. It seems like we were destined to have a movie with Roscoe Attess in it this week. He's in this. He's the guy that stutters, that works at the circus. Mm-hmm. Kind of has like a little Porky Pig thing going on, and I think he's great in this. He's great comic relief, but he's also in King Kong later on. And Parker, your original pick for this week was the 1930s Alice in Wonderland. He's also in that. So it seems like that guy's all over the place in the 30s. So we probably pretty much couldn't avoid him this week. Hans, obviously, he was the little midget guy. He was in the Lollipop Guild in Wizard of Oz later in this decade. So he obviously had some work later on.
I think Frida was too. I think she was one of the Lollipop kids.
Yeah. The guy that plays like the Hercules guy, the bad guy in this, I like that it's 1930s, but with his high and tight haircut and leather straps around his wrist, he just looked like a modern hipster. So that was cool. I don't know. Overall, I think this movie is highly enjoyable, highly watchable, even by today's standards. I think it's really fun. It's got an interesting story. It definitely was. All these movies, I think, were very innovative for their time that we're going to be talking about tonight, and kind of went against the grain of Hollywood. And this was kind of the decade to do it. Because like I said, this was a decade where I think film kind of came into its own. We started to pioneer a lot of storytelling techniques that would last for, decades to come. And I think all three of these movies that we're talking about tonight are examples of people kind of trying new things that maybe the public was or wasn't ready for, but would prove to be influential later down the line. I mean, there's a lot of people, not only the Ramones, but a lot of directors and people that love this movie. And I think there's, obviously the movie that my friend was trying to get, Freaked, obviously I think is directly related and inspired by this movie. And I don't know. I think this is a great film. If you haven't seen it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen this, or maybe you haven't seen it in a while, I would say go back and check it out, because I thought it's a lot of fun.
You like those frequencies?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would watch this frequently.
Ooh, I see. Yeah, I mean, to reiterate, I don't want to come off hating this movie, because I think everybody should watch this, but I don't know, it might benefit you to lower your expectations in terms of like complexity of story or filmmaking, in my opinion, before you watch this. I mean, it's no George Melford flick. Let's just say that.
I say higher your expectations, and they will be surpassed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is great. This is super great. I think that this is, I don't want to say anything too controversial, but I would definitely rank this higher than Dracula or Frankenstein or some of those other Universal guys I've seen.
I'd rate it higher than Dracula, for sure. I don't know about Frankenstein, but yeah, probably.
Better than The Mummy?
Absolutely better than The Mummy.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, check this out. Everybody go out, rush out to see this. See this, and everybody wants some on a double feature. They're very similar movies somehow. So with that wraps it up for Freaks. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the gigantic ape.
Scarface.
Who is Scarface. He's in a gang. He's Scarface. We're going to be watching Scarface. Talking about it. That's a clean out, right?
Thanks for visiting the JFD video store. We hope you enjoyed our burning hot takes on this week's selected movie. Check us out on iTunes or junkfooddinner.com for full episodes. The audio version contains 3 full-length reviews per week, topical news segments, and listener feedback. Great for long commutes, exercise, or surviving the impending apocalypse. Thanks to Chuck Linnington for the on-screen artwork. Email jfdpodcast@gmail.com or check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, or whatever else is going on. We're probably there and wanna hear from you. Until next time, keep washing them dishes.